8:30. Welcome to my vineyard ramble. As you can see, it's an absolutely glorious day. The wind has dropped for those of you who joined me on the rock last night for our Fitou tasting. It was a little bit windy, but now absolutely no wind at all. So it's a great day for getting out and being able to protect the vines, especially as there's rain forecast for next week. That's not so good news. But this is a lovely viewpoint before we go down into the vineyard that we're going to look at today, which is this one here. Look at this viewpoint here. So this mountain opposite me, this is the Tauch mountain. Behind that we have Carcassonne, so that's the Carcassonne direction. But this mountain here rises to 900 meters, and here we were talking about limestone and the importance of limestone in our soils. You can see this limestone outcrop that we have, the ridges of limestone on the Tauch mountain. You see that? And that is absolutely brilliant for vines in the vineyards. If you have a soil with some limestone mixed in, it really helps with the drainage. It's a cool soil, so we're very hot down here. It helps to keep the plants cool and the soil cool. And you get sort of bits or scree coming down from this massive Tauch limestone massif here and going into the soils lower down. And that's what we'll see today in the vineyard. So here we are. I haven't mentioned the grape. We haven't done a spot the vine competition for a while, so I think let's take a look. So this is a very old vineyard. The vines are about 70 years old. I'm just looking for that perfect leaf. How are you this morning, vine? That's a tiny leaf, but see if we can find a bit of a... They're tiny, aren't they? My little bonsai retirement home for old vines here. And you can see I'm having problems finding a leaf because look, they've been so battered by the wind. Can you see that? Really battered that there's sort of half chopped off. But if you'll look at, okay, let's do it with this leaf here. So a fine example, except you can't see it. Here. Can you get that? Actually, don't tell John Mark. Let's do this, it'll be easier. So this is the vineyard we're in today. You can see if I flatten this out, it's almost circular, hardly any indents in it at all. It's a nice, it's a little serrated edge, but quite not too serrated at all, quite big teeth on the outside. The top is waxy and smooth. And if I turn it over, you can see, now there's slight hairs on the back of this one, so that might give you a clue. It's not actually what I thought it was going to be, as usual, but they're little hairs. So on one side we could say this is, and I just have to, the feed isn't going up this morning, so I'm doing it by hand. Grenache, yeah. So that's great. So you've picked up on the Grenache. That's fantastic, all of you who got Grenache. But then when we turn it over, yes, Stephen, it's hairy Grenache because it's actually got little hairs on the back. So Grenache, hairy Grenache. Brilliant. So we're in a Grenache vineyard here, 70 years old. You can see, I'm going to show you the flowers and where we're up to on flowering, but you can see here the effects of the wind, the strong wind that we've been having. Can you see here this branch that's literally come off, been blown off by the wind? But let's take a look because I think it was last week we looked at the flowers on the vines and then we haven't really been back, so I just thought it'd be really good to show you where we are now then. Here we are, little vine. Can I look at you? So, can you see this? Now, this bunch here, because I can call it a bunch now, you should be able to see, you can still see some flowers, like the little yellow sort of flowery bit stamens there. But in between the flowers, you can actually now see what hopefully are going to be the grapes. So there's little grains And hopefully there's a little seed in each of these tiny, you see that? Tiny little grains here. So on this bunch here, the flowering is coming to an end, so we're at the end of flowering, and we're starting to see the grains appear, and that's where the bunches, the fruit, will actually develop. This is a very critical time. Grenache is renowned for not, it's called coulure, so for not fruiting, or I was going to say fermenting, that's not the right word, for not fertilising properly. It's very susceptible to what you call coulure here, and it's a poor fruit set. So sometimes the fruit literally doesn't set, and then it doesn't fertilise and you don't get the fruit. And in Grenache that happens quite a lot. So one year you can get a normal crop, and the next year you can get hardly anything, and that's because the fruit didn't set properly. So at this time it's still a little bit early to be able to estimate the yield, but in a week or so, when all those flowers have dropped off, we'll have a pretty good idea of what's happening. Vines self-pollinate, so they don't need bees, they don't need insects to pollinate. They actually do it all by themselves. They're hermaphrodites. So it's all going on here, and they do it like under a little cap of petals, and the cap just flies off, and that helps to pollinate the flowers here. So this one's still in full flower, and there you can see quite clearly there. Have you got that? The grains. See the little grains? That's the seeds. So hopefully they have been fertilized or pollinated. Sorry about my technical terms. And they should form the bunch. You can already see there's quite big spaces in between the bunches, which is normal in between the grapes because they're quite small, but it may be that some of the flowers didn't pollinate, didn't fertilize properly, but we'll be able to tell. And that's a Grenache. So in this vineyard we've got Grenache and a bit of hairy Grenache as well. Let's see. Yeah, you see this one, we just saw the hairy Grenache. If you look at this, Grenache on the top, and when you turn it over, not a trace of any hair at all. So that is a pure Grenache rather than the hairy Grenache. Hairy Grenache makes quite a different style of wine to the Grenache. It's a bit lighter, and we have a special way of making the wine to get the best from the hairy Grenache. Michel was meant to be with me this morning with Mignon, but unfortunately he got here and he's tried to plough. Can you see here? What he was doing today, he was meant to be getting the grass from between the vines. So you see there's still, although it's pretty clear from grass down the rows, in between the vines there's still some grass. So we use a plough that's called intercept, so between the vines, to actually come in and till the soil between those vines. But unfortunately the soil is now so hard that he couldn't get the intercept to work and to dig into the soil between the vines. So unfortunately he had to abandon. He went up and down, so he would have come up here on Mignon, the tractor, up here, turned around and gone down this one. But you can see he wasn't able to till between the vines, so we've had to abandon. And as I said, we are expecting rain, so hopefully next week we'll get a bit of moisture in the soil, so we'll be able to come back and just get rid of that grass by ploughing with Mignon. If not, that's it for this season. We've still got a bit of grass. It's not a massive problem. It's just that we have no water. It's such a dry area. We don't irrigate, so we have no means of watering the vines. We don't want to water them either because we want them to work hard to produce good quality grapes. Have a look here. Okay, so I was meant to be walking all the way around here. I've hardly got anywhere, but this shows you just a little tiny parcel, which is what Domaine Jones is made up of. This is one of the 14 parcels, and this Grenache vineyard would go into my Fitou. So this would be one of the plots. And as we were meant to be looking at terroir, we know how to pronounce. So here, just to show you, these are chunks of limestone here. that are mixed up in the soil. So there's a clay subsoil here, and then we've got lovely limestone pebbles. They're not really pebbles, but bits of limestone here that are mixed up, which means that the drainage is really good, and that's great for vines. Vines don't like to have their feet wet, so good. And then go over here, this little triangle. So Mum and Dad, do you remember we came down here and we did the top pruning in this vineyard? I think we might have finished up here. It was the last one that we did with Uncle Ed. Top pruning is a lovely job. You just lop off the top branches. Right, time's marching on. Look at that mountain over there. Let me have a look at the questions. So yeah, a question on from Hugh, do we replace the vines? So in this vineyard you can see we haven't replaced the old vines. That every year, unfortunately, there is a small amount of mortality in the vineyard. So we'll have 1 or 2 vines that die off every year. We do replace them. We're replaced with Grenache in general. But in this particular vineyard we haven't done that yet. So you probably notice there are a few holes in there, so we do replace. So a question here from Adam, can you tell Grenache apart from hairy Grenache by the grapes? Well, the grapes aren't hairy, so we don't have that clue, and no, it's virtually impossible to tell the grapes apart once the grapes are on the vines. There's no difference between them. We would know by looking at the leaves, and we have some vineyards which are predominantly hairy Grenache or predominantly Grenache, so we tend to know that. But normally this vineyard, for example, it's predominantly Grenache with just the occasional hairy Grenache. I was just unfortunate enough to fortunate for you to see the hairy Grenache. And a question from Dan here, I think this is the last question. Do the boar eat the flowers and the baby grapes? Boars eat virtually everything, so they not too much trouble with the flowers. They're probably not that tasty, but they do come in. We can have problems with the younger shoots earlier on when the first shoots come out. If the wild boar haven't had enough to eat during the winter, anything that comes up that is young, juicy and vibrant, shall we say, the wild boar do come in and they will nibble those, so that's the main danger. But yes, then they do eat the grapes. They can devastate a vineyard coming up to harvest. So if you've got nice ripe grapes, especially muscat grapes, these wild boar just absolutely adore muscat grapes, so they will come in and they can devastate. If you don't put an electric fence up, they will come in and they will devastate a vineyard overnight. They just like hoover them off. So there we are. I'm going to sign off now from this wonderful view. I think I might just sit here for a little while. See you all tomorrow.